Hello everyone, Chris here, and today I'm going to quickly demonstrate to you how you can create a PowerPoint presentation in PowerPoint 2016. I'll also be trying to show off some of the features of PowerPoint 2016 since a lot of people may be interested in that and learning more about it. So whenever you boot up PowerPoint 2016, or any other version of PowerPoint really, you would go to the File tab and New in order to select a template to start from. Now you can just choose a blank presentation in which everything is blank, obviously. Nothing is in the background, and the fonts are just very generic and standard. Or you can choose one of these themes over here. You can even search online using this search bar to basically bring in an online theme for you to use on your PowerPoint. In this case, we're going to select one of the themes here. I'm actually going to try Berlin this time. And when you select one of your themes, you often have different color variants you can choose from. For instance, if I don't want it to be orange Berlin, I could have a blue alternative to it, green or purple. Some of these themes even come with 8 different color variants, so you can play around with it a little bit and always customize it later within PowerPoint 2016 if you want to. Now, once you go ahead and create your PowerPoint presentation, you're going to be given a title slide by default. And we can go ahead and add a title here. So I'm just going to call it PowerPoint 2016 for beginners. And that title is actually a little bit big, so we're going to shrink that down to just PowerPoint 2016. And we'll say Chris's tutorials, in which case there would actually be an apostrophe and possibly an S, depends on how you want to spell it. Okay, so now we can add more slides, and how we would do that is by either hitting New Slide up here on the Home tab or right-clicking on this pane over here and hitting New Slide. You'll notice that the second slide you create is going to actually be a title and content slide layout. And you can tell what kind of layout the slide is by going up to Slides over here, clicking on it, and you can see this is a title and content slide. We can change this to basically any of these other slide layouts, and different themes are going to actually have different slide layouts. So what you see here in Berlin, like this 3 picture column, may not actually be in one of the other slide layouts, or slide themes rather. So we'll leave this as a title and content right here, and we'll start working on a bulleted list. So let's just call this slide bulleted list. Now down here you see that basically this is a content box. We have the option to either add text or add a table, a chart, smart art, graphics, pictures, online pictures, or video files. Now, you'll notice that these 2 icons have basically a picture of the web or a globe on them. And that's because using these, you can actually pull pictures or videos in from online. Videos, of course, going to be YouTube. Pictures going to be the Bing search engine, and it'll give you Creative Commons images when you go ahead and search. In this slide, we're just going to go ahead and do a bulleted list. So clicking to add text defaults to a bulleted list. Up here, you can see that we're working in a bulleted list on the paragraph section. Of course, we could turn that off by clicking this. We'll add in some points. So let's just make it really simple here. Point 1, point 2, point 3. We'll click out of that, and yep, that'll be fine for that. Now, if you don't want bulleted points, you always have the option on the Home tab of choosing numbered points instead. So numbered list is going to have numbers, bulleted points, obviously going to be those little dots. Not every theme is actually going to have the dots though. Some themes remove that entirely, but they can still be a list without the dots. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So new slide here, and in this one, we'll go ahead and change it to, let's say, comparison, where we have these content boxes, and above them, subtitle boxes that we can use to basically tell us what's contained in these boxes. What is this about? And we'll be comparing 2 online images in this slide. So apples versus oranges is going to be the slide. We'll put apples here in this title and oranges. And now we'll use the online pictures to go dig up some images, one of an apple and one of a orange. All right, that's good. Now, the alignment of the text is not exactly great, I would say here. So what we're going to do is click on each of these titles and center them to basically put the text right on top of where the images are located. So here we'll center that. And we'll also center the overall title as well. So I think that makes the slide look a little bit better. Let's make a new slide. And we'll try playing around with one of these options. A 3-picture column is actually one I haven't really seen because I think that's pretty specific to this Berlin thing. But whenever you try one of the slide layouts, they'll pretty much always tell you exactly what you need to do here. So you add pictures to this slide, this content box, this one as well. And then it looks like you can title the picture and add in some extra information describing the pictures over there as well. Since we already demonstrated finding online pictures or pictures from our computer, we'll actually just skip that slide, but you get the idea. Different slide layouts, they designate different areas and different boxes for you to add different kinds of content to it. However, anytime you have a slide and you want to basically add your own stuff because you don't like the slide layout, you can always go to the Insert tab here. And I did just change this slide layout to blank to demonstrate this. And on the Insert tab, you can add in basically whatever you want anywhere you want. So if you want a text box, just click text box, left click, drag your rectangle, let go, and you have a text box. Of course, from there, you can change the font size, the type of font, you can bold, underline, italicize, basically all the same kinds of things you would be able to do in, say, Microsoft Word 2016. So let's go ahead and demonstrate another thing you may want to add to your PowerPoint presentations, and that's going to be a table. You'll notice down here at the bottom of this table drop-down list that you can actually add in Excel spreadsheets into PowerPoint 2016. So the different Office applications actually interact with each other, in some cases, Excel spreadsheets being one of them. In this case, we'll just do a standard table, which is just fine for most purposes. And we'll do a 4x5. So on these header areas, we can go ahead and put in titles for each of these columns. If you want to, say, remove the header row because you don't need it, you can just click up there. Banded rows is referring to, you see how the colors alternate every row? That's basically just to make it easier to read. So we'll just choose from these different table styles, and let's go with this red one. I like that a lot. So we have Title 1, Title 2, Title 3, Title 4. We could even have a total row where we basically add up all of the different points here to basically get a total. So if we were doing $signs over here, we could say this is $5, this is $15, and then we have $25 over here. You add those together and you get 20 plus 25, so that's 45 if you were going to, have totals for these. And generally, the thing you're going to be totaling is going to be numeric, obviously. But you get the idea. You can kind of play around with that. You can also have these different highlights be in the columns instead. So if you want first column instead of a header row, you could do that very easily. One more thing I want to summarize in this video here is going to be transitions and animations, simply because they make your slides look better. So whenever you want to actually present your slide, like you're ready to do it or you're ready to test it, you go to the slideshow tab, and we can do from beginning here and click through the slides. But you see by default, it just instantly it doesn't even transition, it just instantly pops between the screens. And what we want is a transition where it kind of smooths into the different slides. And that can make it look a little bit nicer, a little bit cleaner, a little bit more professional, or in some cases a little bit more interesting. Because on the Transitions tab, you can click on the More box to see all your transitions. You have two sets of transitions, the subtle ones and the exciting ones. The exciting ones actually are pretty interesting to look at, so let's go ahead and find one. I like honeycomb a lot, so we'll go ahead and select this. And now whenever this slide pops up in our presentation, it's going to do that effect instead of just instantly popping to the new screen. We could add another transition over here. Let's say just split, for instance. This is one of the more subtle ones, so they're not really nearly as interesting. Curtains. I like that one, actually. That's pretty cool. And let's say ripple. And now we can go back to slideshow, view them all, and when I click between the slides, it's going to do the transition. It's not going to instantly pop between the slides. And that just makes it look a lot cooler, especially if you add music in or that sort of thing. Apples versus oranges, okay, and we go to the next slide, you have the curtain effect. You get the idea. So if we actually wanted to add in background music to our presentation, we could go to Insert, Audio, and then Audio on my PC where you've already downloaded a music file. For instance, we have Spyglass here by Kevin MacLeod, Creative Commons music, and I love his stuff, so we'll add Spyglass here. And when you add music or audio, it will give you this little player, which you would actually need to click on by default, but you can change things around here. So we can actually play across all slides, or really automatically over here. If I recall, this actually a way to style it. Yes, right. Play in background. So if we have it play in background, it's pretty much actually going to take all of these options over here and set them to what you would need for background music. So just do that immediately. And now it's going to hide during show, loop until stopped, start automatically. That's what we want. We can even move this off slide because it's not really necessary to see it, since it's just going to be playing in the background. All right, so let's go ahead and test it out from the beginning. And you can see our music's playing. How cool is that? As we go between the different slides, it's still going to be playing. Our transitions are working. Everything is actually really nice. I mean, PowerPoint has come a long way in the last couple decades. So, in any case, I've been Chris. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. And until the next video, I will see you then. In this video, we're going to be discussing the different layouts you have for every single slide when you're creating a Microsoft 2016 PowerPoint presentation. Now, by default, whenever you start a new PowerPoint presentation, you're going to be given a slide that has the title layout. And this is going to include a text box for the title, a text box for the subtitle, and when you create new slides beyond that, you're generally going to have a text box for the title and one for your body text. However, these are not the only two layouts that you actually have available to you when you're in PowerPoint 2016. So if you want to change the layout of a slide, what you do from the Home tab is you go over here to Slides and find the Layout drop-down menu. Here you can change the layout of your slide, and you have a bunch of different options available to you. We're going to be trying to cover pretty much all of these in this video. So you should already be familiar with the title slide and title and content type because those are the ones we've already been working in. The next one up is the section header. So when you have a PowerPoint presentation that's going to be broken down into different components beyond just having a title, and maybe you have 2 or 3 different chapters or sections or whatever you're trying to cover, you can create independent section header slides. And these are really good if you're changing between different topics. So for instance, we click on section header, and we want this to be leading into the first chapter that we're reviewing from our book. So this would be like a book review presentation. So we have chapter 1 right here, and then maybe as the subtext, we could add in the name of that chapter. For instance, just something random, 7 lucky streak. Let's go with that. Now then, after typing in your section headers, you can go ahead and create the slides beyond that, which would actually detail the information of your presentation. And then if you want to create one for the second chapter, you would just do the same thing, go back up to Layout, create a section header, and then put in chapter 2. Very similar to title and content is the to content slide type. This would be where you want to take the lower text box that contains all of the information, body paragraphs, possibly bulleted lists, and splits it into 2 sections. So by choosing to content, you're going to have one box on the left and one box on the right. Next up, we have the comparison type, and this may look very similar to content. It is. However, there's one difference, and that's the section in between the slide title and the content areas. Because what it does is it adds in these extra text boxes where you can label each side of the slide. Obviously, the idea here would be you would use this slide layout if you were doing a compare and contrast, possibly positives and negatives, or one product against another product. Next is title only, which is pretty much like a title slide, except that it has no subtitle. This would be another alternative to section header if you just wanted to have title slides every time you were going to change between different topics or different chapters in a book you were reviewing. The blank slide layout is exactly what it sounds like. You are given an empty slide that has no text boxes on it by default. However, you can of course customize it however you want. You can insert different objects, pictures, or custom text boxes into it. So if you wanted to just make your own slide, you would just go text box, horizontal text box, and you can put the text box literally wherever you want. For instance, I could put one over here on the right hand side, and then I could go ahead and add in another text box for the left hand side. Why you would want it to look like this, I'm not really sure, but you could. With the blank slide type, pretty much anything's possible. Now, something I do want to point out is that every time you create a new slide, you don't have to manually go over here to layout. What you can actually do is click on the new slide dropdown, and you can choose the same options before you even create the slide. So you could just start with this next one, content with caption. And this type of slide would probably be used for photographs or maybe charts and that kind of thing. You see they do provide easy ways to add those in here. And then on the left, you can give a title to your graph or your photograph. And with the subtext, you can add in extra information like who the author or photographer of the work on the right is. Next, we have picture with caption, which is very similar. The difference is that by default, it's not a content box where you could just kind of put whatever you want here, either a spreadsheet or a chart, but specifically, this is for images. And you can see that the layout here is a little bit different than the previous slide as well. The amount of space dedicated to adding a picture here is not quite as much as this content area on the previous slide. Next, we have panoramic picture with caption, which is similar, except that the layout changes. Instead of having the picture on the right, we have a large landscape panoramic picture space up here at the top, and then the title and subtext goes down at the bottom. With title and caption, it's very similar to a default title slide, except you see here that the layout is a little bit different. Instead of having the two text boxes right on top of each other, you instead have a big title box up here and then a gap and a space for the caption or subtitle down below. Quote with caption is similar, except that it actually adds in this little graphic here on the left and right for quotations here, and another extra text box, which you would normally use to give credit to the person who made that quote, and an extra text box down below for extra information. The name card is almost functionally identical to the section header up here at the top right. You could use this to put in one of the people who worked on this presentation or project and their subtitle down below, or any other purpose that you want this specific layout for. A quote name card is very similar to quote with caption, except that instead of having a text box directly below the quote area, you instead have a text box down here at the bottom, and then one below that, very similar to a standard name card. The true or false layout is almost exactly like that previous one, giving you a little bit extra space in these text boxes down below and removing the quotation marks. Now, title and vertical text is actually quite a bit different than the title slide, and the reason for that is beyond the title itself, which we'll just put in a title here, you can actually see that the text goes vertically. So it's turned on its side about 90 degrees, or exactly 90 degrees, and you can start typing information here, such as presentation, enter information. This probably isn't the kind of slide you'd use in a normal presentation that you were going to show on screen unless you were going to rotate the entire slide 90 degrees so that the title was on the left going vertically and this information over here on the right was actually showing horizontally. However, you could use this. It's probably more useful for things like printouts though. With a printout, people could just churn slides like this on its side and read from a portrait top over here on the right to bottom over here on the left point of view. And the last slide layout that you have available to you in PowerPoint 2016 by default is the vertical title and text layout. Now this is very much like the previous one, except that the title is also turned 90 degrees on its side. So we could type in the title here, like presentation, and information over here, and it's all going to be 90 degrees turned on its side. So that's it for the different slide layouts in PowerPoint 2016. Until the next video, I will see you then. In this video, we're going to be talking about the different text options you have within PowerPoint 2016. So right here, it's pretty obvious that we're working with the title slides, so we could go ahead and type some different text in here for the title of our presentation. Let's just call it presentation for kicks here. But let's say that 60 font size isn't actually big enough, or maybe you want to change the type of font you're using here. Well, that's very easily doable. You can click on the font size drop-down menu up here in the top left and increase it, or you could even drop it down, though with the title you probably don't want it that small. So just set it back to 60. An even easier way you can increase and decrease it is by hitting the increase font size and decrease font size buttons. These are of course located right to the right of the font size drop-down, and when you hit these, it'll just jump to the next spot on this drop-down list. So if you have 60 font size and you increase it, it goes to 66, and we can demonstrate that, then to 72, and same in the opposite direction as well. Now as for the font choice itself, it's going to default to Calibri Light within PowerPoint, but there are many different options here that you can use, and you can see that you can actually set a default for the heading and one for the body as well. On any typical Windows installation, Windows 7 or above, you're going to see most of these default fonts as an option within Microsoft PowerPoint and the other software solutions you have on your computer. Of course, you can always go online to sites like defont.com to find more fonts if you're looking for something a little bit more artistic, but the fonts that they provide here are plenty for most purposes. Just like most other software that allows you to manipulate text, you're going to have your default tools, including bold, italics, underline, and over here you have text shadow, drawing a line or stripe through your text. Something that you may not have seen before, though, is the character spacing option. So for every character in a sentence, or, well, a piece of text down here, like a paragraph, you can actually reduce the space between the characters or increase it. So you can see we put it very tight and it gets very condensed together, or you could put it very loose and then there's just a lot of white space between each character as it gets printed. To the right of that, you have several different options for controlling casing for words, such as every character being lowercase, regardless of how you typed it in, uppercase, or you could capitalize each word, which may be good for titles. Now, of course, this isn't necessary at all. You can always just type the characters as you intend it to be shown. Over here to the right, you have the standard alignment tools, including align left, center, right, and justified. So I've gone ahead and typed some text in here to demonstrate what justified actually does, distributing the text evenly between the margins. You see over here on the left that not all of the text is lined up, and over here on the right as well. Justified tries to fix that. So when we hit justified, it's going to ideally make it so that all the text lines up on the left correctly, and all of the text lines up on the far right wherever the margins are. Distributed, the final option, is similar, but what it will do differently is actually add in extra spacing between the text if it's necessary to get the evenly lined up text over here on the far right where the margins are at, and over here on the far left. So let's go ahead and hit that. And you can see, even going beyond justified, it'll make it so that every single line, even the last one where there's only a few characters, lines up as evenly as possible. And it does that by adding in the blank white space. As soon as you start creating PowerPoints, you're almost certainly going to be using numbered lists and bulleted lists. So let's go ahead and demonstrate that really quickly on a new slide by right-clicking over here on the left and going to New Slide. Now here, they've actually already created a bulleted list, which just goes to show you how crucial lists are to PowerPoint presentations. You can, of course, disable that bulleted list that's already there just by clicking up here. You know it's using a bulleted list because it'll be highlighted here when you are selecting on an area that has a bulleted list. And we can change that easily to a numbered list instead by clicking over here to the right. Now, whenever you have a bulleted item typed out and you want to go to the next item in the list, you want to create the number 2 or the second bulleted point, all you need to do is hit Enter on your keyboard, and it will immediately jump down to a new line where you can type in the second element and enter for a third one. So it's very simple to use bulleted lists, and do keep in mind that the items in the list still have all of the text rules applying to them, so we can center this piece of text just by hitting the center alignment, and we can change the font just as easily, and so on and so forth. Now let's say that when you're working with Microsoft PowerPoint 2016 that you want to create another one of these little boxes here. You know they have ones by default that you work with on every new slide, but let's say you want another one. Maybe you want to put a note off to the side. All you need to do is go over here to the drawing section and click on a text box or a vertical text box if you want the text to be typed from top to bottom. So let's go ahead and click on text box over here. Now to create the text box, find an empty space. Left click, hold it down, and then drag and drop your rectangle, and that will be the boundaries for your text box. Just like the default text boxes, you can start typing in information, you can align it to the center if you want, or you could create a list. Another place that you can actually create these text boxes, though, is on the Insert tab. Over here you will see Text, and above text are going to be 5 or 6 options. One of them is text box. You can click on the drop-down menu to select vertical text box, but it defaults to horizontal. That's usually what you're going to use, and it works exactly the same way as the drawing section. A couple other options that are available to you here on the Insert tab are headers and footers. So we can add in a header or footer just by clicking here. Now when you open up the header or footer dialog, you're going to have some defaults which will show on this slide, including date and time. You check that if you want it to show, and it will show in the bottom left hand corner. If you want to have some custom footer notes, you can do that by clicking footer right here and typing in some information like the word slide or something like that. And slide number is going to show in the bottom right hand corner if you check that. Now, if you so choose, which may be a good idea, you can exclude the information from the title slide, which may be a good idea because on the title slide, you really just want to tell people what the presentation is about and maybe who is presenting, but that's it. You don't want that extra information there. You can see that headers aren't going to appear on this slide by default, but you can add them to notes and handout pages. So a note or handout page is going to be where you actually print out the slides, possibly one at a time or possibly several to each page. And then on each of those pages, they're going to have their own header or footer. And you can add in the header information by clicking here and typing in whatever you want it to show on each page, and the same for the footer. Let's go ahead and demonstrate how the header would look like if we were to actually do a preview of a print. So once again, if you're just printing the slides out, you're not going to see the note or header information. You only will see that if you are actually printing out note pages or the outline of your PowerPoint presentation. So if we click on note pages here in the print layout, you'll see that the header that says slide is actually going to show, and the same with the outline. So as one last fun text-related thing for this video, let's talk about word art really quickly. So if you want text to be somewhere on your PowerPoint presentation, but you want it to look a little bit different than your regular text, maybe you just want it there to look a bit artistic, stand out, or just kind of fun, you can click on the word art drop-down, and you'll be given some different options that all look pretty nice, honestly, where you can just take text and put it somewhere on your PowerPoint presentation to make it look kind of fun, kind of artsy, kind of stand out. So for instance, if we click over here on this gold gradient one, we'll be given a text box that we can immediately start editing, very similar to just regular text. When you're using word art inside of PowerPoint 2016, you're given some extra options in the form of shape styles and word art styles. So if we wanted to change the border and the background of this text box, we could do so over here in the Shape Styles box. For instance, we could change the border by selecting this option with a red border. If we want one that actually has a background color, we can scroll down, perhaps changing it to a green background. And if you want to customize each element individually to whatever colors you want, you can click on Shape Fill for the background color or Shape Outline for the border. If you want the text to stand out a little bit more, what you can do is a shape effect. So we could, for instance, give it a glow, where this entire text box is going to have a glow instead of just a normal border. We could add a shadow to it, kind of looking similar to a drop shadow. For instance, I could put it as this bottom right-hand corner one. That's usually what I would use if I was doing any kind of text manipulation. If you want to customize the text itself, you got to go over here to Word Art Styles, where you can, for instance, change the color of the text, filling the outline of the text. You notice that the text itself does have a border, and you can change that with the text outline. For instance, let's make it red here. And you can add text effects very similar to the shape effects, but instead they're going to directly manipulate the text. So for instance, a bevel, if you want your text to be a lot more 3D, you could add a glow. Or you could add in a reflection effect to make it look like it's mirroring itself right below the text. So you should get the idea here with word art. It allows you to play around with your text and make it stand out a lot more than just having regular text that's black and has no background behind it. But I would say when you're making PowerPoint presentations that you should use this lightly. It's not something you want to go overboard on, because having these text boxes can be a little bit distracting if you use it too often. So that's all for this video on text within PowerPoint 2016. Till the next video, I will see you then. In this tutorial, I'd like to take some time to introduce you to the different templates you have available inside of Microsoft PowerPoint. So whenever you start a new presentation, you have the option of creating a blank presentation, which actually is usually not recommended, or you can start off with a template. Now, these different templates provide certain things for you right off the bat, including background colors, or possibly even a background image, like in the case of Celestial. A font choice for your title, different font choices for your subtitles, and all the text that follows on future slides past the first one. And the people who created the templates have already gone ahead and chosen the text colors for you to mesh with the background and all the other elements going on with the template. So what using a template allows you to do is save a lot of time and effort getting a head start on your project. So normally, if you're going to create a new presentation, it's a good idea to just go ahead and select one of these templates here. Of course, if you don't like the templates available here, you can always search for more online using the search bar at the top. So if we wanted to go up here, we could search by maybe putting in a color like orange, and it would return templates that are similar to the information we put in there. In this case, it did in fact return a lot of templates, which may have been tagged with the word orange for obvious reasons, because you can see these templates, for the most part, have an orange theme about them. Now let's go ahead and try using a template. When you click on a template, certain ones actually have multiple color schemes. So for instance, with this Berlin template, if you don't like the orange-based color scheme, you can try a blue one or a green one. And although the layout is still the same, it does change the colors so it can suit your purposes better. When you've selected the one you want, just go ahead and hit create, and it'll basically set you up with a good default slide. Now, whenever you create a PowerPoint presentation, the first slide is almost always going to be a title slide. So the template has already gone ahead and added in text boxes for us to type in a title and a subtitle. So we can go ahead and do that right now, just something very simple, and a subtitle. I'll just put my name there, and that's fine right there. That would be a absolutely reasonable title slide to have, and it took us very little effort to actually get this set up. That's what templates do for you. Now, you'll notice if we go ahead and create a new slide, that actually the layout becomes a little bit different. You can see it's still got that theme going on. With the Berlin style, where you have the black box for the title of the slide, and then a little bit of green, light green filler over to the right. And then we have the main body text in the lower portion. And that's the section that's really different from the first slide, because in the first slide, it was just the title taking up everything. So here you could, for instance, start putting in your bulleted points like 1, 2, 3. And then you just need a title for the slide, and you'd be pretty much good to go. And in general, just go ahead and fill out your presentation just as normal. Now let's say that after choosing a theme and starting to write your PowerPoint presentation that you actually don't like the theme you chose. What you can do is go over to the Design tab, where you'll be presented with all the other themes you have installed, and you can quickly swap between them simply by clicking on them on the list. And if you want to see more, just click on the down arrow towards the end. And to the right of that, you may see different color schemes for the theme you currently have selected, so we could easily just change it over to the blue theme by clicking here. Now let's go ahead and say that you're not fully satisfied with how the background actually looks in this theme. For instance, you don't want this exact gradient, or maybe you don't want a gradient at all and you'd rather have a solid color. What you can do is hit Format Background over here in the Customize area, and you can choose between solid fill, gradient fill, picture or texture fill, which would be where you use an outside image, or a pattern fill. Now let's go ahead and demonstrate those different fills. Solid is going to be one single color all the way across the background. You can see it doesn't actually look that bad using that color, but in general the gradient makes it a little bit more detailed. Now, if you want to actually change the gradient, you can click on each of these different colors. You can also drag them around to determine at which area the gradient is going to be what color exactly. You can, of course, change them by clicking on color and selecting from the drop-down, or you can hit more colors and just choose your own, any of the colors in the RGB color model. You can also change the direction of the gradient to tell it which side or which corner of your PowerPoint presentation do you actually want the gradient to be starting and ending. For instance, linear right means that the gradient is going to end at the far right, and it's going to take one single path to get there. That's from the left to the right, and it's going to go straight there in one direction. And all of these different gradient patterns you see here are linear. However, you do have different kinds of gradients available to you if you click down on the type menu. A radial gradient is very much like a sun effect. Imagine you're staring at the sun and the light is focused towards the center of the circle. That's going to be a radial gradient. So in this case, the initial radial gradient, the sun is somewhere over here to the bottom right-hand corner. And of course, it's not a real sun. It just looks brighter, and then it dims as it goes further away from that center point. However, we could easily change where the center point is by clicking on direction. And for instance, we could put it in the center by hitting the from center direction. And now the light is concentrated in the center of our slide. Now for each of these different gradient stops which we have set within the gradient, of course we can add more by hitting add or remove gradients to basically make the gradient more complicated. But for each of these points, we can change the position, the transparency, and the brightness. Now the position means how far from the starting point are we going to be percentage-wise when it actually turns this color. So you see, if we increase this, the point where it turns into this light blue specifically is going to be further away from the center point because we have the center from gradient selected here. Now in this specific case, what actually happens is that everything before this point just assumes the same color as this point because there's no other gradient stop to give it any more directional information. So everything before 24% now in the position has the same color as the 24%. But if we, for instance, moved this on the other side of the first gradient stop, then you'd notice that the color that starts off this whole thing was actually what was originally in the middle. So you can really play around with this, and there's actually quite a bit you can do with gradients. Now transparency is talking about how visible the colors of this gradient are. In the background behind this whole slide, what is actually there is just a simple white background. So if I take any of these points and set it to 100%, you'll notice that a portion of this gradient just churns into being completely transparent. You can actually see the white background behind it. Now, you can't see it perfectly because when you have gradients, you have two different points of the gradient. It's actually merging those two sets of settings, the two colors, the two transparency levels at every step in between. So halfway between the start and the second point, it's going to be roughly 50% transparent. And it gets more and more transparent as it reaches that center point. Now when you set the brightness of a gradient stop, what you're basically telling those different stops is at that specific point, how far towards the light color or white do you want this gradient color to be, or how far towards darkness or complete black do you want it to be. So if we set it to -100, it's actually going to turn completely black, even though the color was set to some kind of blue. And if we turn this to 100, plus 100% brightness, it's going to become completely white. So everything between plus and -100 is going to be some shade of whichever color we actually selected. So I'll set that back to 30 for now. Now with picture or texture fill, I did mention that you can use your own images, either from online or your own local computer. However, you don't necessarily have to do that. They do have built-in textures to PowerPoint 2016, which is quite nice. Because if you want a textured background instead of a gradient, you could just select from one of these. And they all work fairly nicely, though not every single texture will fit with every base slide design. Now, if you click on online right here, what it's going to do is bring up the Bing image search. Now, you got to keep in mind when you're searching online that certain images may not just allow anybody to use them. They may be copyrighted. But one thing they did really nice here is that when you search for an image, by default, it's automatically going to be churning up Creative Commons images. And Creative Commons images, you do generally have permission to use freely as you wish with different kinds of materials. For instance, a PowerPoint presentation, a Word document, or a blog post. That said, you can hit Show All Web Results to actually show non-Creative Commons images. But if you're going to do that, once again, you may be running into some copyright issues, so do be careful with that. Now, one of the more important options you have available here is to tile a picture as texture. Now, with any texture, that's pretty much going to be a default because a texture is an image file that you actually want to keep repeating until it goes all the way across your entire slide. For instance, if we uncheck this, you'll see that instead of being tiled and repeating itself, it just stretches itself all the way across, and that looks terrible. But you may or may not want to actually tile it if you're using a regular image. For instance, if you're just putting in something that already has like a 2000 by 2000 resolution, you may not want or need to tile it at all. If you want to shrink your image down, you can do that with Scale X and Scale Y, but you will note that you can only actually go to 100% with this, so you can't make it even more expanded. It can only be scaled down. So we could make this 50% and 50%, and then you'll notice that it tiles a lot more, and that's because we've basically taken our texture and made it an even smaller tile. Now in that case it doesn't actually look good, so we're going to back off on that. With alignment, you can control the starting place you want this image to be at. So by default, it's going to be at the top left up here, of course, but we can make that top right. And you'll notice that the image shifts around as the tile aligns itself to the top right corner instead of the top left. This would be a lot more noticeable if we were actually using just a standard image instead of a tile, but you should get the idea there. Specifically with textures, you can get some interesting effects, and yes, I did change the texture to this fish one so you could see this better. But instead of just having this tile where it goes the same tile over and over and over again all the way across, what you can actually do is use this mirror type to basically reflect certain portions of the tiles over across the horizontal axis or the vertical one. So I'll go ahead and show that now. And you can see that when I reflect it, it actually changes how the pattern appears on our slide. And you can do vertical as well, or you could do both simultaneously. Now, patterns are even simpler than a texture. In fact, here we're basically just looking at different dots or lines that the computer's drawing instead of an actual image. So in this first one, we just have a bunch of dots using the same color as before. We could, of course, change that foreground color to red, which will change this all to red dots. Very, very different than the blue dots. And we can change the background color to something else, though black would be pretty standard. So if we made it something like green, it's pretty bad. That's one reason why you normally use black or white as a background color. And we can also change the pattern. Now this is all being generated by the computer on the fly. The patterns are simpler, but that doesn't mean they're not worth considering. Sometimes you want something that's not going to stand out too much in the background so that people can actually just focus on your text. Now, if you do decide that you're satisfied with the new background, you can go ahead and hit Apply to All, which will change the background of all your slides. But if you ever want to go back to the default, just go ahead and click back up on the variants, and then hit Apply to All again. Now, one option I haven't been talking about is the ability to hide the background graphics. Now, you do have this background, but you see in the foreground we have this black box and this smaller light blue box. We can actually hide those completely just by hitting this option. Back on Picture or Texture Fill, I'd like to show you a couple more tabs over here that you actually have in Microsoft PowerPoint 2016. The Effects tab allows you to take your texture and actually change it up a bit with some different artistic effects. For instance, we can kind of apply this plastic warp, and it's going to change it dramatically. Now, that doesn't look so great. We can, of course, play around with the smoothness, which will make it kind of blurred out, or a lot sharper if we decrease it back to a 0, and make that effect specifically transparent. Now, the effect transparency is not going to have a direct effect on the pattern itself, only the transparency of the effect. Now let's go ahead and try a couple more of these out here just to kind of demonstrate. These may not work with every texture so greatly, and it may be too distracting from the PowerPoint itself, so you can use these, but be careful with them. On the Picture tab, you have some of the same controls that you would have seen on gradients, including brightness. Now, contrast is a little bit different. Contrast will actually just make the colors stand out dramatically different from each other. So if we bump contrast up to 50%, you see that it becomes a little bit hard to look at because these different colors are just so harshly pitted against each other. But if we put a negative contrast, then it dulls the colors out and it becomes easier, softer to look at, and harder to actually differentiate between any of the different colors on screen. Brightness, of course, if you increase brightness, it's going to look a lot lighter, and if you decrease the brightness, it's going to look a lot darker, getting closer to that black color. Increasing the sharpness level will put harsher edges on our texture here, or our background image, whichever we happen to work with. The presets are just putting it at 0%, 25%, or 50% sharpness, or 25 or 50% soften. To better demonstrate sharpness and soften, I went ahead and changed the background image so we can get a better look at this. Now we're going to change it to 50% sharpness, and what this will make this image is a lot more edgy. The lines will be much harsher. Now you can see we sharpened it and it looks harsh. But if we do the opposite, we change this to a -50, it's actually going to soften it and make it very blurry. It's hard to actually even see exactly what the original image was. And of course, as the last options you have available to textures and pictures on your background image, you can play around with the picture color. And this has some nice options, basically allowing you to set the color tone. You can of course, use presets. If you want a very light and yellowy color, you can change the temperature of the color to, say, 11200 K. And now it basically completely changed the look of this image. We can, of course, reduce it, change it to a cooler look by dropping it to 4700 K color temperature. Now it's got a soft blue look to it. Other options you have available to you is to completely recolor the image. For instance, if we want to make this portion pretty much black and the background itself to a red, we can go ahead and do that. So now it's basically stripped all the color out here, and anywhere there was white before is now going to be a red color. It looks completely different. And then of course, we can decide how much color we want. The color saturation, if you set that to 0%, it's going to have no color at all. If we set this to a higher level, it's going to have incredibly vivid colors. So we could change this to 250% color saturation. Let's actually go ahead and remove the recolor though, and remove the color temperature so we can go ahead and see that better. So this is with 250% color saturation. You can tell very, very vivid colors. If we change that back to 100%, it's the original, still kind of vibrant, kind of vivid colors, but more manageable. If we set this to 10%, it's almost completely grayscale. And if we do set that to 0% exactly, it does in fact become grayscale, black and white. So that's all about choosing your template and controlling how it looks for now. I'll see you in the next video. In this video, we're going to talk all about images within PowerPoint 2016, and there's certainly a lot you can do with them, so let's go ahead and get into it. Now, to add in any kind of art asset in PowerPoint 2016, you're going to be looking at the Insert tab. There you'll see a section called Images where you're allowed to add in pictures from your computer and also online images. So the difference between pictures and online pictures is when you click Pictures, it's going to open up a dialog looking at your computer for local images. These are images that are located on your computer or possibly on a network resource like a shared drive. Now, when you go ahead and search online pictures, and this is one of the things that the 2016 Microsoft Office package is doing pretty well, is that it will open up an option for you to use the Bing image search in order to pull images from online into this document. So for instance, if I type in any kind of search term, let's say a name, how about Chris? Let's, put in my own name. It won't show me, but it will show someone named Chris. And here we're going to get a bunch of different images. Now, one of the great things about the search here is that by default, it's showing Creative Commons images. Now, a Creative Commons image is under a different type of license. It's not copyrighted in the same way. You can go check all this information out on the Creative Commons official website, but Creative Commons images are going to be licensed under one of a few different categories, and those are going to basically be including Creative Commons attribution, where you can use an image inside of your work by just giving credit to the original author. You don't have to pay for licensing fees or royalty fees. And there are other types of Creative Commons licensing, including non-commercial, where you can't use it for commercial reasons, meaning you can't sell works that include that image. Now, the downside of this Creative Commons image search is that it doesn't show precisely what license it is, because there are different types of Creative Commons. But if you go through to the website and actually look at what kind of Creative Commons it uses, then you can make sure that whatever presentation you're putting together actually complies with that. And you can do that fairly easily by clicking once on the image and then left-clicking on the web resource location, the web address. For instance, if you wanted to check out the licensing for this information, you would click through to Wikipedia. And then when you have it open, you can left-click on the image desired. And from here, you can see in the bottom right-hand corner that this is actually being used under fair use. So you do have to be careful, because even if it says Creative Commons search, it's not flawless, obviously. However, you still can use this to look around for different images for your PowerPoint presentation. You just have to be careful with them and make sure you're not stepping outside of licensing bounds. Like here, for instance, publicdomainpictures.net. I'm aware of that website. So this image most likely is, in fact, Creative Commons or public domain. So we'll take a look here, and we'll just make sure it is in fact licensed public domain. Public domain images you can use freely. They're not owned by anybody. And when you have an image inside of your PowerPoint presentation, you're going to be given a lot of different options. For instance, if you click on Remove Background here when you have the image selected, then it's immediately going to highlight what the program actually thinks is the background. In this case, it is the white space in the background. So this is very much like a green screen effect you got going on here. And you can manually mark areas to keep, areas to remove, and delete marks. But in this case, it already figured it out. It's very simple because it's just a plain white background. And we can go ahead and hit Keep Changes. And now you can see that with this image, even though we still have the apple, there is no white background anymore that's overlapping this title over here. So that is a pretty useful effect for including images in your presentation. You've also got some correction tools, including sharpen and soften and brightness and contrast here. If you want to make an image very bright, you could use one of these options over here where it's incredibly bright. If you want it to contrast, you go down. Less contrast is up at the top, and a darker image is going to be to the left. So it's a XY axis kind of grid you got going on here. You can also play around with the color, removing all of it completely by dropping the saturation to 0, making the color very, very vivid by increasing it to a 400%, or to even a 300% is still very high saturation. Changing the tone of the colors, making it more of a yellow, bright color with a high temperature, or a low, cool look to the image by dropping it to a low temperature like 4700 K. And then one of the more fun options is to recolor the image. Now, with this, you could do something like change the color of the apple completely to a red or orange or something like that. And if we still had a background, you would notice that the background would change from white to whichever color we're selecting here. And they do have more options as well, black and white, for instance. And you can choose any color you want with this kind of recoloring effect by going to more variations and just grabbing the color you want that apple to turn into. Similar to the remove background effect, you can target a color and make that transparent within your image. Now, it's not going to be perfectly precise here because, of course, there's a lot of different colors in this image. It's not just one perfectly red apple. So if we click here where it's a bit green, you'll notice it removes a little bit of color, but it doesn't remove all of the green around it because those are actually different colors we're dealing with. So the transparent color effect here can only really be used with solid colors, simply because you don't have any extra options here to give it more leniency in which colors it actually removes, going a little bit past a precise red color to colors that are similar to it as well. And if we click down at the bottom of this drop-down menu, picture color options gives us a lot more control over the color in this picture. For instance, we can mess around with color saturation manually, typing in exactly the percent we want. Color tone, if we can increase this to pretty much any level we want, if we want to make it look bright or more yellow, or lower if we want it to be blue. You also have the recolor effect here as well. And you can resize the image using these text boxes. Of course, you don't have to do it that way. You can easily resize as well by left-clicking on one of the edges and dragging and dropping it, or rotate the image by clicking on the rotate symbol. The position options allow you to control which part of the slide it's actually going to appear in. So this is saying that it's 3.24 inches to the right and 1.15 inches down from the top left corner. Obviously, if we change this to the center, it's going to move it, and dragging and dropping it would have the same effect as typing in a specific number in here. You can also give the image a title and put in a description for the image. In this case, it already had one because it brought it straight from Bing. Not something you normally need to do, but it's good to be aware of that. And similar to the effects you have for text, you have a lot of the same effects going on here, like the ability to add shadows. For instance, we can use a preset and give it kind of a drop shadow in the bottom right-hand corner. Of course, it doesn't look perfect because this image is a little bit choppy after removing the background. Other effects include reflection, glow, having softer edges. Let's go ahead and actually demonstrate that here. So with soft edges, it actually blurs the edge of all of the edges to make it look less sharp, because without that effect, it does look a little bit choppy. Then you have 3D effects, which can take this image and try to give it a 3D appearance, even though it's actually just a 2D option. You've also got options here for taking the image and making it appear more 3D, such as adding a bevel to it, which is similar to how you add a bevel to text. And then at the very bottom, you've got artistic effects, which can take our image and basically change the way it's presented in very interesting ways. For instance, if we use a light screen, it almost looks like we're looking through a screen to actually view our image. So these artistic effects drastically change how our image is actually going to be portrayed. Another option would be film grain, which makes it look like maybe it was on a VHS tape or some kind of really old stock footage. And you've got other options to play around with here as well. Now, you will notice that a lot of these same effects that you can find under color and color picture options are also included in picture effects. You got your shadow, reflection, glow, yada, yada, yada. Same stuff going on there. And then over here on the last tab, we have fill options. So when you have your background removed, we can actually fill that in with any solid color we want, a gradient, or we could even put a texture or a picture as the background to this picture. Patterns allow you to give it a very simple design. Patterns allow you to give it a very simple design, which you can change the colors on by selecting the foreground and background colors. And one option that we didn't see before with text boxes is that you can add a slide background fill. So what this is doing is it's taking the background that would be in the slide itself and applying it here. For instance, if we go ahead and change the design on the slide, you'll see that immediately it applies the same design to this image itself. If you had a group of different images inside of your slide and you wanted to organize it in a fancy way, you could go to Picture Layout, which will convert it into a smart art graphic, basically taking the image and then organizing it in a specific layout. So in each of these cases, it usually adds in a text box that you can title the image, and you see that it's also throwing borders around them. But if we had multiple images selected, then it would be doing the same effect to all of them. So for instance, if we had multiple images, we could do a picture grid. So let's go ahead and do that right now by adding in some extra images. All right, so we now have 4 images of an apple. So let's select all of them by holding Control down. And now if we go to picture layout and picture grid, it'll automatically resize them to be equal. Throw a border around each of the images, though you can't see it on the white ones because this border is white by default. We can, of course, customize the style here by choosing between the different smart art styles. You may not just want a white border. For instance, the intense effect kind of makes it zoom out a bit. If we want a black border, we can go over here to this option, cartoon. And it looks like this option, yeah, it's going to put it on its side. That's actually really neat. And if you didn't like the layout you chose, you can always switch over here to a different one, like this masonry style. And once you have the smart art graphic created by taking all of these images and converting them, you'll notice that you can actually move everything at once, but you don't have to. You can always move the individual images within the smart art graphic as well. All right, so enough of that. Let's go to Screenshot and Photo Album. What Screenshot allows you to do is immediately take a screenshot of any other window you have open on your computer and add it into PowerPoint 2016. So, for instance, the only window I have open right now is OBS, Open Broadcaster Software. It's what I use to record these videos. So I'll go ahead and click that. So you can see that just by doing that, we have a perfect screenshot of my other window. Photo Album allows you to insert a whole bunch of pictures into your document at once. So you would do this from files on your hard drive. So we could click here and open up this folder where I have some other images from some other videos that I've created. So I'll just select these first 5 images, add them in, check them to indicate that I actually want them to be added into this document. And you'll notice down here at the bottom that you have some options for determining the layout of the album. For instance, you can decide how many pictures do you want to show on each slide. By default, when you import an album like this, it makes a new slide out of each image. So we could have 4 pictures and a title on one single slide. And you see over here that it gives you a little graphic to represent that. So there'll be a title at the top and 4 images below that. The shape of the frame of the image, by default, it's rectangle, but you can choose some other options down below. Then down here at the bottom, you can choose a theme to use with those different slides that are going to be created. And this is basically the equivalent of choosing a design for your entire presentation, because when these photo albums are added by default, it adds them into a brand new presentation. So let's go ahead and use organic, select it, and hit create. And you'll notice that it makes a presentation for us, and it will add 4 images per slide, assuming that there are 4 images left, with the title to that document. And in the first slide, it gives you a nice title slide saying photo album by the name of the person creating the document. Now, there are a few different photo options we haven't talked about here, including compress picture, which will take your image and compress it to reduce the file size. If you hit change picture, it allows you to take this image and swap it out for another image either on your computer or the internet. And then reset picture is going to reset all of the formatting changes that you've made to this image. So for instance, if you've changed its color to, let's say, this red over here, and you go and hit reset picture, then that's going to disappear immediately. It's going to return it to its original. Now, there's also an option in the drop-down menu. If you've increased or decreased the size, you can go to reset picture and size, which does everything reset picture does, but it also returns the size to the original. And that does mean the original size of the image as it was imported into this PowerPoint presentation. Over here under picture styles, I'm sure you've been noticing this bar for a while. What this allows you to do is actually frame your picture any of these different styles. So we have a normal picture here, but it doesn't have any borders or anything. We can click on these different picture styles to actually take our image and put it in a frame. And some of the frames are black, some of them are white, some of them are rectangular, some of them are circular, and some of them have a curved bevel shape to the edges of what would otherwise be a rectangle. So if you're looking for a way to improve the images inside of your slideshow, you can try using the different picture styles in order to do that. Just like tables, you also have the option to arrange your images or to manipulate the size of your images. But one other option that they don't have for tables is the ability to crop your images. And this is specific to images. So if you have a portion of your image that you actually don't want to display on the screen, you would use the cropping option to do this. So if we click this and go to crop, what we can do is actually adjust what's going to be shown inside of this document. So whatever in the crop is what's going to be kept, and everything else is going to be removed. So all we need to do to complete the crop is simply left click out here in the white space, and there we go. We have a cropped image of this number 4. Pretty cool. Now you probably noticed that the crop in this case was a bevel rectangle. You can actually change that to basically any kind of cropping shape that you want. For instance, you could even do an up arrow if you want. So we go ahead and use the crop up arrow, and it adjusts our crop into an arrow. We can go back and recrop that, of course, because when you change the shape, it's going to change what's actually going to display. And we can just adjust that until we get it right, and then left click out of it again. If we don't like the ratio of our image, we can adjust that aspect ratio to portrait or landscape. So if we have a landscape aspect ratio, this arrow is going to become much wider than it is tall. So let's go ahead and do 16 by 9. And you can see we've got an arrow here, but it's wider than it is tall. And that's because 16 by 9 would be widescreen. So you're expecting wider than it is tall. Now these last two options at the bottom, fill and fit. If we used fill and our image that we were trying to crop was actually too small, what it would do is adjust the image size, basically stretching it, until it filled this entire shape. If we use fit, then it will reduce the size if it's larger until it fits perfectly within our shape. So by using fit, it's going to adjust the image so that it fits within this shape. Now how it does this is by adjusting the height and width until the height and width of the image is equal or lower, in the case of the width over here, to the shape we're trying to crop to. Now the reason this 4 isn't fitting within this crop anymore is because the crop has a 16 by 9 ratio and the image is a 1-to-1 perfect square ratio. However, we could fix that by going back to the aspect ratio and cropping back to a square, and now it's going to fit again. So that's all for pictures and images within PowerPoint 2016. As you can see, there's a lot of different effects you can apply to them, and they are very useful tools as they are with any other type of document. Until the next video, I'll see you then. In this video, we're going to be talking about 4 extra sections inside of the Insert tab of PowerPoint 2016, and this includes shapes under the Illustration section, video, audio, and screen recording under the Media section. So a shape inside of PowerPoint 2016 is very similar to adding a picture in, except instead of having an image that already has a predefined resolution, you're actually just selecting one of these shapes, and you can scale it immediately to any size you want. No matter how high you scale it up, it's still going to look exactly the same, and it won't get distorted in any way. Now, by having these shapes generated by PowerPoint 2016 on the fly, you're able to edit them in different ways while you're working within the program. For instance, if you go up here to Edit Shape in the Insert Shapes section of the Format Drawing Tools tab, you can edit the points on this shape and actually manipulate it so that you take the original shape and turn it into anything you want. If you've ever used the pen tool of a program like Photoshop or GIMP, it's actually very similar to that, in that all of these points are actually creating the shape on the fly. Now, beyond just customizing the points, you can also change the background color very easily over here in Shape Styles, selecting one of the options. If you look at the different pages of styles, you'll find other options here as well, such as being able to change the outline color of the shape, being able to take the inside background color and make it much more subtle, or removing the background altogether and making it only an outline. Of course, just like word art text, you can also customize the background color to whatever you want with Shape Fill, change the outline color or remove the outline altogether, and add a shape effect such as a glow, a reflection, or a shadow to the object. It's also possible to include word art or text inside of these different shapes, to arrange them like any other object within a PowerPoint 2016 presentation, and to customize the size using a text box rather than dragging and dropping on the corners of the shape. Now we're going to talk about including a video file inside of your PowerPoint presentation. While normal PowerPoints are just about presenting a slideshow, you could include a video inside of one of your slides if you want to play a clip when you get to a certain point. So by clicking on the video drop-down menu, you have two options. One is to use a video on your PC, and the other is to include an online video, such as one from YouTube. So if you choose to include a video from online, you have two options. One is to search YouTube right here, and the other is simply to include an embed code. And you can also find embed codes on sites like YouTube, but other video sites do include embed codes as well. When you search for a video on your PC, you're simply selecting from all the different documents and files you have on your computer. Typical video formats would include something like AVI or MP4. Including audio inside of your PowerPoint presentation is very similar to including video, except when you click here, you don't actually have the option to include directly from an online source. You're given audio on my PC and record audio. If you choose a file from your PC, it would just include it over here where you would have a sound effect you can click on during the PowerPoint presentation. If you do include any audio files, you're given a wide variety of different options here, such as the ability to add a specific bookmark at a point in the clip that you can easily jump to just by clicking, the ability to trim audio if you don't want to be playing the entire length of the clip, only a certain portion, to add a fade in or fade out effect where the audio will gradually get louder or lower at the start or end of your video, controlling the volume setting, and perhaps most importantly, the settings for determining whether the audio is going to play when it hits the slide or when you click on the play button right here. If you want it to play automatically, you would just click on this drop-down menu for Start and choose Automatically. You could also play it across all slides if you have background music and you want it to keep going as you transition from one slide into the next. Looping a sound effect or music means that it will not stop until you actually go back here and hit the pause or stop button. And if you do want this little audio button to not show, then you simply need to check Hide During Show, and the icon will not be visible during the slide. Rewind after playing is pretty self-explanatory. Once the file finishes playing, it's going to jump the audio back to 0 seconds and 0 milliseconds. Now, if you don't want to play around with all these settings, and maybe you just want it to be automatic, Hide During Show, to loop until stopped because you're going for that background music kind of play, all you need to do is actually hit play in background over here and it will automatically check play across slides, loop until stopped, hide during the show, and automatic start. For the video options, you also have the option of having it start automatically when it reaches the slide where the video file is on, hide while not playing, and rewind after playing. You can see that with this video I'm pulling in from YouTube, that you don't have the option of adding bookmarks and trimming videos, and that's just a limitation of YouTube. But if you actually use a video that you have downloaded on your computer or a network hard drive, you can add bookmarks, trim the video, and actually add a fade in or fade out effect. Lastly, back here in the Insert Media section, we're going to go to Screen Recording. So when I hit Screen Recording, it brings up this option to actually do a screencast, much like we're doing right here with these tutorial series. Except, just to note, I'm using Open Broadcaster software, not PowerPoint 2016, in order to do this. However, you could use this effect to record anything you wanted to actually show people on your computer. For instance, if you were doing a tutorial, this would be an option to do that. If you don't want to record the entire screen, then you would simply use Select Area. And then once you have that area selected, you can go ahead and hit record and it will start recording. If you don't want audio enabled, you would simply uncheck the microphone right here. And if you want to hide the pointer, you would simply uncheck record pointer here. But we do want those enabled, so I'll go ahead and hit record to kind of demonstrate this. So you see it has a 3-second countdown, and at this point it is recording a file. Let's go ahead and stop the recording now. And you'll notice that when we actually stop the recording, that what it does is it takes that brand new video file and actually includes it as part of our PowerPoint presentation. I'm sure you could already see how this could be a very useful tool for teaching people about different things, which is largely what PowerPoints are actually used for. Classroom presentations, corporate presentations, educating people. So the fact you have the screen capture feature here, really cool, and I do approve of that. Now, if you want to take this video file and actually save it permanently outside of the document, all you would need to do is right-click on it and go to Save Media As, choose a spot on your computer, and save it there as a video file. And just like any other video file saved on your computer, you have all of the same functions over here, including add bookmark and trim video. So that's all for shapes, video, audio, and screen recording inside of PowerPoint 2016. I'll see you in the next video. In this video, we're going to be talking about the different transitions that are available to you in PowerPoint 2016. Now, a transition is an effect that plays when you move between one slide and the next slide. The classic example of a transition that also applies to film would be a fade between one shot or another shot. You can do the same kind of thing here, except instead of video footage, you're simply dealing with slides. Now, this is the complete list of transitions that are available to you inside of PowerPoint. You see that there are three different categories. The first one is subtle, second one is exciting, and the third one is dynamic content. A subtle effect is going to take a back seat to the content itself. Whenever you use a subtle transition inside of PowerPoint, the effect itself is not going to be particularly noticeable. It's trying to take a back seat to the content itself. It's not trying to show off. It's just trying to provide a smooth transition between the two slides. So for instance, if we try fade out here, you'll notice it immediately gives you a preview. So you saw that it faded between the first slide, the title slide, and the second one right here. So this would be the effect that would play when you move between slide 1 and slide 2. An exciting effect is going to be one that intentionally stands out. It's going to be a lot more dramatic than a subtle effect. And in this case, maybe it's trying to be a little bit more fun than any of the subtle effects, because the subtle effects are very passive. They don't really get your attention so much. And with these exciting effects, you might be able to get a little bit more of an ooh-ah reaction from your audience. So for instance, let's go ahead and try this fracture effect, and you see that the screen basically shatters into pieces. Now, that's not the kind of thing you really expect out of a PowerPoint presentation, so to a degree, you would remember that when it's presented to you in a PowerPoint presentation. The difference between a dynamic content transition and the first two categories is that in a dynamic content transition, the text and other objects in the slide also move in addition to the background itself. So if we try a conveyor here, you'll notice that the text slides off screen and the next text on the second slide actually slides onto the screen from the right. Let's go ahead and demonstrate a few more examples of a transition. Let's start with wipe, which is a classic example of a transition. Let's also try cover here. And a couple more from the exciting category. Let's try origami. That one was actually pretty cool. And lastly, let's go ahead and try the honeycomb effect. Now, you can clearly see that the exciting transitions are a lot more dramatic than the subtle ones. Some of these transitions, though, you may have noticed actually have the option over here to modify the settings. Now, effect options are going to be specific to each transition. For instance, with the shape transition, you have the option to choose different kinds of shapes, like a diamond or a plus sign, or it can just be a in box or out box. But that's not going to be the same with something like a fade. With a fade, you're going to have entirely different options. In this case, it fades through black, which means it's going to go to black, and then you'll have the new slide. Now, lastly, we're going to touch on these timing options over here. If you want a sound effect to play whenever a slide transitions, you need only set a slide here. For instance, we could put something like drum roll, and then go ahead and preview this fade transition. Now, that drum roll was really short, and we can increase the duration of the entire transition, which also will increase the duration of the sound effect, by increasing this over here. So let's make that a 2-second drum roll, and then preview it once more. Okay, that's a little bit better. If you quickly want to apply the same transition to every single slide, you need only hit Apply All, which is going to include all these different settings, including the transition you have selected, the effect options you've chosen for it, and the sound effects, if any. A typical PowerPoint presentation is going to have one guy standing up in front of a room with a projector screen, and that person may have a mouse clicker where he can easily choose when he wants the slides to transition, and he would do this whenever he's done with a slide. However, another option you do have is to make the slides automatically transition by checking this after box here and then setting a duration in seconds or even minutes for the transition to automatically take place. Now, before we wrap up here, one word of advice I would give is that if you're trying to put together a serious presentation, you should go pretty light on the exciting transitions because you don't want to totally overwhelm your audience with just the graphic effects. Most presentations inherently are supposed to be about the content and not the graphic effects that you can play around with. That said, transitions are a great way to make your slides flow a little bit better into each other and also to spruce up your presentation so that it's entertaining to listen to and watch. So that's all for this lesson in transitions. I'll see you in the next video. In this video, we're going to be talking about animations inside of PowerPoint 2016. Now, an animation is very similar to a transition in that it is an effect that plays when a certain event triggers, such as having a slide enter onto the screen. However, animations can play at different timing periods and specifically apply to objects within your slide and not the slide itself. So many of these animation effects are actually going to be what's essentially a transition effect, but only for these objects on the screen. For instance, if we add a fade animation, then whenever this slide loads, this object and only this object is going to start fading in. You can immediately see the difference if I turn that off, go to transitions, and then apply the slide transition effect. Now, one thing that animations do allow you to do with your objects on screen is to manipulate their size and direction in different ways than you would have available with a simple slide transition. For instance, if we drop down the list of animations available to us, these motion path transitions allow the object to move in a way that a slide cannot. So we could do a churn here by selecting the churn motion path. And you see when the slide comes in, this object moves along this path to the right and then curves downwards until it reaches its bottom position. However, you can make the churn a different direction as well. If you want it to move down and to the right, you can do that as well. Or have it curve up instead. If you wanted to get more detailed with a motion effect, you could choose edit points. And what edit points will allow you to do is actually tell it exactly what path you want this object to take as it plays its animation. So we could move this point all the way up here and give it a very different curve than just a simple churn to the left or churn to the right. Let's go ahead and preview this in the top left corner. If from the start you already intend to have some wacky custom path, you can of course choose the custom path type, where it allows you to just set the exact path by drawing on the screen that this animation is going to take place for. If you'd like precise control over the animation path that it's going to take, you can choose custom path from the list and then start drawing this red line, which will determine the exact path that this animation is actually going to take place on. And when you're done, just double click on the screen and it'll preview it for you. Just like an image, we can actually drag the entire animation over here to the left so that it's a little bit more on screen when we actually play it, and then go ahead and preview the animation. Now, any of these selectable PowerPoint objects are available for the animations, so we could take this smart art graphic and actually apply an animation to the entire thing simultaneously. Let's go ahead and try this wheel animation. Just like transitions, you're going to have effect options depending on which animation you're using. So for instance, we could increase the number of spokes from that 1 clock-like motion to 8, where it becomes more like a pinwheel. The advanced animation section allows you to actually add multiple animations to one single object. So for instance, if we want a second animation to appear, we could click Add here, and maybe just add a motion path line animation. You can see that we actually have two animations that are going to play here by opening up the animation pane, and we can see all the animations that apply to this specific object. Because the wheel animation fades an object out, we're going to need to change this to another one. So let's select a non-exit animation. Let's go for an entrance animation, such as a wheel. Now if we play the animation from the first one, it's going to play that entrance wheel animation, and then this set of objects is going to move up on the screen. So let's go ahead and play that right now, and you'll see what I mean. It actually moves down. My mistake. Now you're probably wondering if it's possible to change when these animations play, and that's certainly possible. With any animation you apply to an object, you have the ability to choose its triggering event. And this is a major difference between a transition, where these animations can play at different times, but a transition can only occur between one slide and moving to the second slide. Now, there are two different sets of triggering events you have available here for the animations. The ones that occur at specific points in a bookmark, which would mean a bookmark of a video, as in a specific timing in that video, or a specific timing in an audio clip, or when you click on an object inside of this slide, such as the title. Now, when you do set these triggers, they will only actually take place when you have the slideshow running. So, for instance, we can set this to Title 1. Then when we actually play the slideshow from this current slide and click on the title, that animation is going to take place. However, you do have more triggering options than this trigger section in Advanced Animation. If you go to the animation pane and click on any of your animations, you can click on the drop-down menu to the right of the animation and tell it when it's going to take place. One option is to have it start on clicking the object inside of your PowerPoint presentation. The next one is to have this animation play at the exact same time as the previous animation in this animation pane list. Another one is to start after the previous animation if you want animations to go sequentially. And you also have other options here, such as effect options. With these animation effects, you have the option to smooth out the start, setting a duration for a smooth start. Same with the end. Having a bouncing effect at the end, which we can demonstrate here by putting it at 1 second. And you see at the end, it did a little bit of a bounce there. You can add sound to the animation. And you can have the object dim to a certain color after the animation is complete. So if we choose orange here, it's going to dim this object to an orange color. On the timing tab, we have the same options to tell it when to start, how much it should delay after that starting event has triggered, how long we want the animation to be, and whether we want it to repeat or not. Specifically for Smart Art, we're given a Smart Art Animation tab where we can take our Smart Art graphic and actually have it applied to each of the sub-items, such as this picture here, or the text down below, or the title over here, individually rather than everything at once. So for instance, if we choose by level 1 by 1, you'll notice that it changes the animation quite dramatically. Those same timing effects, which are available in the Effects Options dialog, are also located up here in this timing section. So you're able to tell each individual animation when it should play, how long it should be, how long you want it to delay when the triggering event occurs, and over here on the right, you can reorder them on the animation panel, which will do the exact same thing as these up and down arrows here. That's more or less everything there is to animations inside of PowerPoint 2016, but you can see that with this many animations available to you and the ability to customize them with triggers and setting start events, animations are actually quite powerful within PowerPoint 2016. So if you want to take any object you have on a slide and animate it at the beginning of the slide or at a different point in the slide, you need only use one of these animation effects. So that's all for animations in PowerPoint 2016. I'll see you in the next video. In this PowerPoint 2016 video, we're going to be discussing the Review tab of PowerPoint 2016. Now, the main focus of the Review tab is to look over your content after you are finished creating it. And you're given a bunch of different tools in order to do that, including proofreading tools in the form of spelling and grammar and the thesaurus, Insights, which lets you look information up on the internet from within PowerPoint 2016, translating text into different languages and setting the language that you intend for the PowerPoint presentation to be written in, adding in comments to the document that don't actually show in the presentation but are available to people who are editing the document, and comparing this version of your PowerPoint presentation with previous versions that you may have created, and to accept and reject the changes and overall review them and make sure you have what you need. And lastly, another way to write notes onto your PowerPoint presentation directly is to use pen inking. If you've ever used a Microsoft product, then you're almost certainly familiar with spell check. The spell check in PowerPoint works the same way as pretty much any other program. When you have errors in your spelling, it's going to be underlined with red text. And if you want to check that, see if you can replace a word with the correct spelling, all you need to do is hit Spelling and Grammar. It will search through all the text you have in your PowerPoint presentation and suggest changes for each misspelled word. In this case, something is obviously a misspelling of something, so in the spelling and grammar slide out window, it's going to suggest the word something as a change to that. If we want to change it, we can hit change. If we want to change all misspellings of that same word, we could hit change all. And if we want to ignore that spelling correction, we can hit ignore. Ignore all cases of that misspelling, or even add the word to the dictionary if it's a properly spelled word that Microsoft PowerPoint just doesn't recognize. In this case, we'll just hit change here. And we'll do that for all of these 4 misspelled words as well. Is obviously spelled with a S. Wrong only has 1 G. And the word here has 1 R. So in this case, we've corrected all the spelling mistakes in this document and we're good to go. Now, the thesaurus is different than spelling and grammar. You're not actually trying to correct things, but what you would do with the thesaurus is take a word and actually change it into a word with a similar meaning. So if we hit thesaurus here, it's going to suggest words that are like something, but don't have exactly the same meaning. For instance, approximately is kind of like another way of saying something, but it may be a more precise word depending on your situation. If you have some text in your document and you actually want to look it up online and see if you can gather more information, that's what you use Insights for. So with the Smart Lookup, it's going to give you the Insights slide out menu that has immediate access to Wikipedia, Bing Image Search, and Bing Search Engine Search as well. If we want to convert our text into a different language, we can easily do that with the Translate option. Translate selected text will take this information here and immediately translate it into a different information. And it'll give you a little warning. To translate your document, text will be sent over the internet to a third-party provider. If you're okay with that, go ahead and confirm it. So now that we have this slide out window open, we can go ahead and translate our text into just about any language we want. Let's go ahead and choose a simple one such as Spanish. Now in this case, it can't perfectly translate the exact phrase spelling mistakes, but it does give us a Spanish translation of the word spelling. So we can go ahead and select this text and replace our word spelling with the Spanish version of it. If we were to change the proofing language to Spanish, then you would immediately notice that all of these other words would be considered misspelled, and that's because it would be checking for Spanish spellings on all of the words. If you want to change the language that spelling and grammar is checking for, then simply set the proofing language here. And you can also customize the language further in the language section of PowerPoint options. Let's go ahead and add a comment to our document now. Now, whenever we add a comment, this isn't something that's actually going to be showing in the final product when we're displaying our presentation. It's just simply a note that we add to the document so that whoever's opening it up, or perhaps whoever's editing it, is going to know what we added, what changes we made, and giving them advice on maybe how to present the PowerPoint or how to make changes to it. So with this note, we can click. So with this note, whoever is opening up this document can go ahead and click on this and see who made the note and what the note was about with the information that the person who made the note typed in. If you had multiple notes, you'd be able to navigate between them simply by hitting previous and next rather than clicking around on the slide. And you can also add in new notes from here. Any of these little notes that you stick on a slide can be positioned anywhere you want. It doesn't really make a difference. It just needs to be in a spot where whoever needs to read it will actually notice it. Whenever you actually have comment notes on your slide, you'll be given the option to navigate between previous and next in the comments section over here. And if you click on one, you can simply hit delete to remove it. But if we want to hide it from the design interface, we can click on the show comments dropdown and hide show markup. Whenever you want to see a list of the comments that are available, simply enable the comments pane, which is the default function if you click up here as well. In order to demonstrate the compare functionality of PowerPoint 2016, I've gone ahead and created a separate version of this Review tab PowerPoint presentation. So if we want to compare this one with another one and accept and reject changes, we have to hit compare, find that file on our computer, select it, and hit merge. Here you're going to be given a list of changes between this version of the presentation and the other one. You can see changes to specific slides over here in slide changes, but for new slides that were created or old slides that were removed, you would see that in presentation changes. Same presentation changes can be found over here on the left where your slides are listed. If you want to see the changes, you would simply left click on one of them. Any presentation level changes are also going to be shown over here on the left where your slides are listed. And if you left click on any of these notifications, you would accept a slide into your presentation. You can also accept changes by left clicking on the change, going over to accept, hitting accept change, or you can accept all of them simultaneously for a specific slide by hitting accept all changes to this slide, or the entire presentation by choosing accept all changes to this presentation. Likewise, if you select any of the changes over here by left clicking on the ones on this list, either all changes or each one individually, you can reject those changes by going over to reject and hitting reject change. In the same way, you also have the option to reject all changes to this slide or the entire presentation all at once. If we go over here to the slides listing and click on this change, it's going to show us what the new change would look like, and it will have it selected. However, we can simply click on that change and go over to reject if we actually don't want to accept that. By default, by clicking on that, you'll notice that there's a check mark, and that's going to mark it as accepted. So if we want to reject it, we can either have the slide selected or click over here on presentation changes for the exact same effect and reject that change. After we're happy with all of the changes we've accepted or rejected inside of our document, we can simply hit End Review. Another way to navigate between the changes, and this way might be a bit quicker, is to hit Previous and Next, which will just go up and down the list of changes until you reach the end. And then, much like a typical spell check, it will ask you if you want to start from the beginning so that you can review them once more. But once you've accepted and rejected all the changes that you deem necessary, you can go ahead and hit End Review to confirm everything. However, you do have to be careful with this. When you hit End Review, this will end the review and any unapplied changes will be discarded. Meaning if you had any of these changes and you didn't accept or reject them, they're just going to be thrown away from the current document. And if you want to get as close to drawing on your presentation as possible, you would use the inking tools, of which you have a pen, a highlighter tool, eraser, a lasso, and the ability to just select objects. Now you can use these tools in just about any manner that you want. A typical use might be to take the red pen and circle part of your presentation that you actually want to focus on. Another option may be to use the highlighter to focus on certain words by highlighting them. The eraser tool erases specifically whatever was created with pen and highlighter. So if you try to erase the text of your document, it's not going to get rid of anything in a text box. But if you erase the highlighting or the pen tool, it will get rid of that immediately. Using Lasso Select, you can take any of your pinning or highlighting and select that by simply drawing a circle or other similar shape around that pin or highlighting in order to select it. And at that point, you can manipulate it however you want, such as stretching it, moving it to a different location on the document, or deleting it entirely. If you're just trying to select one pinning or one piece of highlighting on your document, you can just use the Select Objects tool and left-click on it directly to select it. As you can see, you do have different variations of pins, including different colors and thicknesses, that are available to you while you're drawing. And if you want total control over your color, you can select over here any color you want. With the thickness dropdown, you can select between many different thicknesses on your pen. So that's all for the review tab of PowerPoint 2016. I'll see you in the next video. In this PowerPoint 2016 presentation, we're going to be discussing the View tab. Now, all of the different sections of View primarily revolve around displaying the information you have in your PowerPoint presentation to you in different ways. For instance, if we go to Presentation Views, we can see our slides presented differently. Before we get into discussing the presentation views, I want to point out that you don't necessarily have to be on this tab to access some of these. In the bottom right hand corner, you have the option to actually choose between some of the presentation views, in this case including Normal, Slide Sorter, and Reading View presentation view mode. The normal presentation view is what we've been using in the rest of these tutorials up to this point, And this layout is going to have the thumbnails for your slides over here on the left, and then a big display area for your currently selected slide while you edit that slide. If we go over to the outline view, it's very similar. Instead of looking at the thumbnails on the left, though, we're actually looking at the text outline of the slide. This view is more useful to you when you're more interested in the text on the slide rather than the visual layout of the slide and the background and all of the objects within it. This outline view is more useful to you when you're specifically interested in the text on the slide rather than all of the visual aspects. You can't see the visual aspects here, but you can certainly see all of the text. If you want to look at every single thumbnail in a larger presentation, the slide sorter view may be what you're going for here. Because what the slide sorter does is takes your entire workspace area and converts it into a list of your thumbnails. You wouldn't be editing the slides directly from this view, but as the slide sorter name would suggest, you can move them around and you can also add new slides or delete old ones. So this is a good view if you're trying to work with the slide level. Next up we have the notes page view, and what this allows you to do is have a very large section for your slide notes to be able to record things that aren't actually going to appear on this slide. And if you already have notes or other people have written notes for you, you can view them very easily from this format. Whenever you want to look at a different slide on this notes page view, you would simply scroll up and down to get to the slide you're looking for. And each slide is going to have their own notes text box. Inside of Reading View, you're actually looking at the PowerPoint presentation as it would be presented in full screen mode, just without it actually being full screen. So if we added in some animations here, it would actually show as we switched slides. In order to demonstrate that, I went ahead and added in a transition effect. So this is the honeycomb slide transition, and you can see that it plays despite not being in a full screen presentation mode. The two best ways to exit this mode is either going to be to switch to a different presentation view mode down here in the bottom right, or to simply hit escape on your keyboard. That's all for presentation views in PowerPoint 2016. In the next video, we're going to be getting into the Slide Master view, which allows you to create custom themes and modify the different slide layouts that you have available in your presentation. See you in the next video. In this lesson, we're going to continue talking about the remainder of the View tab in PowerPoint 2016, including Master Views, Show, Zoom, Color/Grayscale, and the Window sections. When you're talking about the Master Views, what you're really talking about, in terms of Slide Master, is the ability to see and control the aspects of all of the slides of your presentation simultaneously. Give it an overall look that applies to every slide by default. In addition, what you can do with Slide Master is to customize the look and layout of different layout types. So if you remember, whenever you go ahead and add in a new slide, you have a bunch of different droplets or layout types. So it doesn't have to be a title slide. It can be title only, blank, content with caption, etc. And when you customize it inside of Slide Master, you can make things show or hide by default in each of those slide types. So it allows you to customize different layouts. Handout Master and Notes Master are different. What they do is to allow you to see how your PowerPoint document would print out to a handout type or a notes type. So notes is going to be where you have this section down here. And the section down here is specifically for notes, and then at the top you have the slide, and this would be how each page goes ahead and prints out. Now you notice you can customize what actually will display here. So anything you change in this page is also going to change by default on a notes printout page. So for instance, if we add in a background color, let's see, background styles, such as a blue background, and we close this out. Now let's go to print so that we can go ahead and see that notes type. So instead of printing out all slides, we're going to be printing out the notes pages. And you can see it's immediately gone ahead and added in that blue background. Now this will show on any slide we have as long as we're printing to notes page. If we go back to the View tab and we instead manipulate Handout Master, it's going to have the same effect. To demonstrate how this will look, I went ahead and created a couple of slides, so let's go check out the Handout Master. So when we're looking at the handout master layout, what we're looking at is 6 panels, which are going to be displaying the slides if we print it out to this format. Down here we have the footer, which we can change the text, manipulate what's going to show. Same up here at the top for the date and time, and the header, if we want to customize that, put in default text for instance. If we leave it blank, then it's just going to display whatever text we have in the header and whatever we have in the footer. We can, of course, remove these elements from the page by clicking down here, get rid of the header, get rid of the date, etc. Likewise, placeholders also exist when you're talking about the Notes master slide. Of course, they have a couple extra ones. I believe the extras are the slide image and the body. So you can actually get rid of that Notes body if that's something you want to do. Further customization you can do within the handout master is to customize the orientation. It's either going to be landscape or portrait. If you don't know already, landscape means you turn it on its side, it's going to be wider than it is tall. Slide size allows you to customize the size of each slide, obviously. The 2 default options are going to be 4:3 as a ratio, which is mostly for older monitors, and the now standard widescreen 16:9 ratio. In most cases, you're going to leave this as 16:9, but it might be the case where you're actually working on a really old computer, a really old monitor that has a 4:3 ratio, and maybe that's actually the width you want. Maybe you actually want it to scale down. We're not going to go ahead and do that though, because we do have a 16:9 monitor. Now, one of the more important settings that you will have is the ability to set slides per page. If 6 is too many, like it's overwhelming people, maybe the size is too small on each of these elements for people to read, you can change it to say 4 slides. That's more reasonable. You could even do 1 slide per page, but in that case, it almost defeats the purpose of even having the handouts. You might as well just do a standard printout of the entire presentation. But yeah, 4, 6, or 9 are probably going to be most standard. I would usually stick to 4 or 6. So now for the good stuff, let's go into the slide master view. And here we have the ability to customize each of these layout templates or droplets for our overall master layout. And this is specific to each theme you include inside of PowerPoint 2016. So the on the design tab, which you can't see right now because we're in master view, so let's actually back out of that. Each of these different designs are going to have their own styles. You see that the font choices change, the positioning of the titles change, the positioning of the body paragraphs change, and that's all customized per template inside of Slide Master. Now you don't have to save it, but you can save whatever you change here as a permanent layout. So if we were to go to themes after we've edited it and hit saved current theme, we'd actually be able to reuse the styles, the changes we've made in a brand new presentation. In other words, this is where you would go if you want to create your own custom themes inside of PowerPoint 2016. Now, rather than setting default text here, what we're going to do is mess around with the styles, the font styles here. Because whenever you click on the initial text out of a layout, it's going to immediately prompt you to change it anyway. So rather than do that, setting a custom title for every single slide, we're just going to hover over our text and change the style. So for this specific slide layout, the section header layout, we're going to just change this to a really big font size, and we'll also change the subtitle over here to pretty big font size and make it italicized, bold, and underlined. So now we'll back out of this, create a slide using the section header layout. Let's just go ahead and find that here. And there it is. So we click here and you can see immediately this slide has the same font size and the underlining, the italicizing, and the bolding of the subtext. So just by changing it there, we've basically changed it for all slides we create and all future slides as well. So let's go ahead and create a title now here and just make it something generic like title, and you'll be able to see even more with the subtitle because it has the underline. So we'll put a name here, Josh, why not? And you see it's big, it's bold, it's italicized, and it applies even after we change the text. Now, if you'd rather changes to, say, the title font choice or title font size To propagate across all these different sub layouts, what you want to do is you want to go up to the master slide. And here we can make changes that will just affect everything beneath it as well. So if we click here and let's say Home tab, change the font size to 60, you'll notice it changes for basically everything down here. Now, if we go back to this slide where we've customized it and say change the font type and decrease the font size, you'll notice that the changes we make here, because they're custom, actually going to differentiate themselves from the master slide layout. The master slide only applies if the sub slides don't have their own customization. So in other words, at the bottom tier at the sub slide layouts, if they have custom changes, it's going to keep the custom changes rather than using the template of the master slide. Now, a more demonstrable option here might be to just select all of our text and go ahead and change the font choice to something that's radically different. And that is one way you can really change how a document looks. And you see it applies once again to every layer right below it. Likewise, you can also change the font type inside of the footer, inside of the date, and inside of the page numbering as well. So you really have a lot of customization there. Beyond all that, though, you can even customize the background for your entire presentation. So if we click on the master slide, which is generally where we're going to want to change that, since we want the styles to be consistent, go to background styles. We can change the color, make it a gradient, make it even just plain white if that's what we want. We can click on this little icon over here in the bottom right hand corner of background to format our background, and then we can change it to a solid fill, a picture or texture fill, which allows you to even grab images from online if you want to use that as the background. Make it a gradient fill, change the gradient tabs if that's something you want to do. You can make it whichever two colors you want. So here I could make it green at the beginning, and towards the end we'll make it, let's say, a lavender, which looks absolutely ridiculous. Now, in addition to changing the original master slide layout and all of the layouts beneath it, you can also insert your own slide master, which will allow you to put new layouts beneath that slide master. So you have two slide masters for different sorts of slides that each have their own preset defaults. So if we go ahead and hit insert slide master, we basically almost have a second theme within our original theme. And this slide master, every change we make here is going to apply to the slide layouts beneath it. We could, of course, remove all of these default slide layouts by selecting them, going ahead, right-clicking, and hit delete layout, and then just create brand new ones by hitting insert layout, which we can customize exactly how we please. And the main way we would do this is, well, first off, choosing whether we want a title and the footers to display on this slide, and using insert placeholder to add in different kinds of content. So if we want there to be a text box, we just hit text and drag and drop the text box we want to add. If we want there to be a picture in this layout, we simply give it a section for that picture, dragging and dropping, same type of thing there. Another placeholder that we could add is media, which would allow us to bring in videos from online on each of these slides. And by customizing it like this, we can quickly create templates for ourselves to use for our own custom purposes, if that's what we want to do. Due to time constraints, we need to make this a two-part video, so in the next video we'll be covering part 2 of the remainder of the View tab in PowerPoint 2016. See you then! In this video we're going to be covering the remainder of the View tab, starting with rulers, grid lines, and guides. So let's go ahead and jump straight into it. Back in the View tab we have the Show section, which includes ruler, guidelines, guides, and notes. Now, these options basically give us extra information that's going to show on our user interface to help us kind of work with our document. So I'll just click and show you what I mean here. The ruler, for instance, allows us to see basically the width and height of our document in inches and be able to basically measure, if that's what we want to do, or estimate the approximate width or height of each element on our slide or the page we're working on. Guidelines can go a step above that by even showing us each 1-inch square box. This is 1 inch by 1 inch using the current measurement system. And using that, we could easily expand that to make a 2" by 2" box. And this could be useful when we're designing our slides if we want to try to make things pixel perfect. And these guidelines in the ruler would be useful because it allows us to visually see exactly how large our objects are on the screen compared to the other objects inside of our slide. So it would be helpful for slide design in that sense. Now, the guides are probably one of the most useful tools here because instead of just being able to see visually how wide something is or what the distance between 2 points on your slide are, you can actually clip different objects on your slide to wherever you set the guidelines at. So if we have this guideline set at 3 inches and this one, the horizontal guideline, then if we add an object to our slide, let's say a picture, we'll just type picture in here. Don't need to get anything fancy. We'll just insert this balloon. We can take this object and actually clip it right on the border for wherever we set the guidelines for. So this allows us to snap objects to exactly where we want them inside of our slides. And because the guidelines are movable, we can easily do this for any spot on our slide that we want. So if we instead decide we want this balloon to be over here at the plus 2 inches out of the center mark. And we also want it to be down 1 inch from the center vertically. Then we just move our object down here. This is the way that you would have a pixel perfect slide inside of PowerPoint 2016. Now next up we have the zoom options. When you hit zoom, you have the ability to choose the percentage of zoom that this display has. So right now it's at 101%, which means pretty much what we see is the actual size of the slide if we were to print it out. We can zoom in 4 times as much, 400%, cut it down to 1/3, or type in our own percent. So if we type in 20% and hit OK, it's going to look very, very small. Now, of course, you can zoom back in very easily in the same manner. So let's put it at 80%. And you may have also noticed that down here at the bottom right hand corner, you have these same zoom controls. You can zoom to 100% by getting it in the middle, zoom out, zoom in, even type in your own percentage just by clicking on that zoom box. Now, one of the more useful tools, though, is going to be fit to window, which regardless of what window size you're actually using inside of PowerPoint 2016, it's going to fit this display to the space that's available to it. In other words, it's going to make the maximum usage of your window that's possible, and that's usually what you want. The color/grayscale options basically do one thing, and that's to either enable the color to be showing inside of PowerPoint 2016 or to remove all of the color out of your PowerPoint presentation. So color, obviously, that's what we've been working with this whole time. You can see visually it's got all the colors from this purple at the start of the end of the gradient rather, back to this green at the top. Everything in between has some white colors, grays, blacks. That's all well and good. Now below color, you can see how your PowerPoint presentation would be translated into grayscale if you're going to be printing in grayscale, and how it would look in black and white. Now grayscale is going to be a little bit different. Grayscale is lighter than the black and white, which is going to be using up your black ink. Grayscale, of course, you can still see here the colors, the brightness, it's all there. It's just replacing those colors with different levels of gray. Now, if we go over to black, you'll notice it's quite a bit darker. And there's also other options for viewing how your PowerPoint presentation would print out. It all depends on what you want to see. How do you want to actually print out your document? Are you going to be printing in grayscale or light grayscale or black and white? It's up to you. Mostly this is just like a print preview mode, so you can figure it out before you go ahead and actually take the plunge and print. Now, last up here, we have the window options. Now, when we're talking about windows, we're talking about this entire PowerPoint presentation window, this whole thing we've been working in. But you may know with PowerPoint 2016 and pretty much all Windows applications, you can actually have multiple windows loaded at the same time. So if we hit new window, we could actually be manipulating a whole second PowerPoint presentation here that we weren't working on before. So we could go ahead and, let's say, open a previous one, like the Review tab document, as its own window, close this out. And now we've got these two different windows that we're working on. However, you may notice immediately that, if you're trying to have two different windows on screen at the same time, it's a little bit fussy, things get in your way. What you might actually want to do is arrange them on your screen so that you can have multiple windows displaying and being able to be worked with and manipulated in simultaneously. So for instance, if you go up to Arrange All, what it's going to do is stack your windows on top of each other, essentially, so that you can see them all at once. So for instance, if we go up to Arrange All, it's going to take our screen space and distribute it so that we can see all of our windows at once. So we hit Arrange All, and you'll notice one of our PowerPoint presentation windows is over on the left, the other is on the right, and it's perfectly split down the center. So this would be really good. If you need to work in two PowerPoint presentations at the same time, maybe you're comparing them. And it would be even better if you do happen to have a really big monitor, for obvious reasons, because you can only split up a screen so many times before it just gets too tiny and hard to work with. Now, if you don't want to be able to see the entire window, you just want to be able to see which windows you have open, another option is to cascade them on top of each other. So you'll have one on top, and then the ones that are behind it, you'll be able to see their titles, but you won't be able to see the content inside because it's sitting behind one of them. So cascading, we see that presentation 1 is on top. We can see the title of the second PowerPoint presentation, but we can't actually work inside of it unless we go ahead and click on it. But this is actually a pretty useful tool because it allows us to make better usage of our screen. And whenever we want to switch between them, we just go down right below the PowerPoint presentation we're currently working in, click on that. If this one is the one that's in front of the other one to begin with, we go to the top and click behind it, and you can see that it's really easy to switch between them when we have them cascaded. Move Split allows us to take the different panes of PowerPoint 2016 and adjust the little dividing line to determine which pane gets how much space. Now, we could always just click on the dividing line between them and left-click hold, drag it to get it exactly where you want it to be. Or you can hit Move Split, and when you hit Move Split, you can adjust it by using your keyboard instead. So we can hit left and right to adjust it in the exact same way. We can also do up and down to basically take the center pane and allow the notes pane to actually show at the bottom. You may actually notice that down at the bottom you have buttons which allow you to bring out the notes pane manually or to bring out the comments pane. So I can hide notes again by just clicking on notes, and I can bring out the comments pane by clicking comments. And from here, as we've talked about previously, you can go ahead and add in comments to your document anywhere you want. These don't show in the document, but are notes that other people can see, i.e. comments. Even if you have your PowerPoint presentations cascaded with each other, you don't necessarily need to click outside of a window in order to switch between them. In fact, you may have the situation where you want them all to be full screen so that you have maximum space. In that case, you can use the Switch Windows option to switch between all of your open PowerPoint presentation windows. So I just switched to number 2. I can go back to View and switch back to 1 very easily. It's essentially the same as Windows 10's, or basically all version of Windows, the toolbar that they have, where you can switch between the different windows of a program. It works exactly the same way, except within this, it's specifically within PowerPoint 2016. So that's all for the View tab in PowerPoint 2016. We're probably not going to be touching much on macros simply because it's a bit of a complicated subject, and to create a macro in PowerPoint 2016, you do have to have some programming skills. So thank you for watching this video. Till the next one, I will see you then. In this video, we're going to be delving into the last base tab of PowerPoint 2016, and that is the Storyboard tab. Now, on the Storyboard tab, you'll notice a lot of these different sections already have pretty much the same information, the same options that we had before on the other tabs of PowerPoint 2016. What's different here are really two, I guess you could count 3 things. Firstly is shapes, which is primarily what we're going to be talking about today. And then there's storyboard links and storyboard help, which we'll touch on very briefly. Now, storyboard shapes, what this is talking about is basically creating your own mock-up designs within PowerPoint 2016. We live in the day and age where mobile applications and software projects are just a really big deal. They've propagated everything. Microsoft is big on them. They have Visual Studio. their own universal Windows apps that people are making. And they've tried to integrate PowerPoint 2016 into that kind of mindset, or to give tools to those type of people, the people who are making presentations based on apps or designing apps. So when you click on Storyboard Shapes, what it's going to do is open up this Storyboard Shapes pane. And from here, you actually have a bunch of different mock-up items. This is actually very much what you would see in a Visual Studio visual design, where you have these different items you can place, such as buttons, calendars, and then at the top you also have backgrounds, which are kind of like these overlays. For instance, we drop a Windows Phone on there, and it's basically giving us a dummy Windows Phone where we could load this up with other elements to create a mock-up design. So, for instance, a drop-down box. Let's say that we were doing a presentation, and this presentation was supposed to basically say what this app is supposed to do, how it's supposed to look. Basically, exactly what mock-ups mean. Giving you a rough idea of what it's going to look like before it's actually done. So here, we're going to have like a text box over here, and maybe we have some hyperlinks at the bottom for social media or something like that. And we could even put like a mouse pointer over here. You probably wouldn't have a mouse pointer on a phone, obviously, because it's touch-based, but you get the idea. You can create these different slides using the storyboard shapes to basically tell a story, tell people what an app is going to be about by creating these designs or mock-ups straight with the storyboard shapes. And you have a lot of different options here. Windows apps, for instance. You could even go ahead and drop in a keyboard to the screen. So you can tell it's not necessarily Windows mobile apps. It can also be just Windows in general. Now, how you decide to use these shapes precisely is pretty much up to you. And of course, it doesn't have to be specifically Windows stuff in all cases. If you click Find More Storyboard Shapes online, you can actually see that there are quite a few different people creating packs of shapes that you can use within PowerPoint. And these shapes, once again, pretty much anything you want to use if you're designing an interface, if you just want to make a slide look a bit cooler by having icons displayed, whatever you want to use it for, it's really up to you. Now, let's say that you go ahead and create a design that you actually like, and you select all of these different items. What if you actually want to make that something you can reuse? Well, you can go back up to Shapes and hit either Add to My Shapes or Export My Shapes, where you can save this onto a file. So let's go ahead and try Add to My Shapes first. And you can see we've gone ahead and created a storyboard shape. So whenever we want to reuse this image of this really, really badly designed app, we can just drag that onto the screen again, scale it to however we want, and it's really simple. It's all in one. And this is a great way to basically copy your efforts wherever you need them. So once again, we can export our shapes. So we want this to be something that goes all over the place. Everybody can see it. And we want this to be an item that the whole company uses. Well, we would just save it somewhere and share it with the company however we want to do that, whether it's going to be a cloud sharing like Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive, up to you. Likewise, you can import shapes in the same sense, where you locate a shapes file somewhere on your computer, somewhere on your network. Those two are just for sharing with other people and importing them back into this program. Now let's say that we make some minor changes to this shape as one image object, and we make it either bigger, or in this case we'll make it wider to kind of make it more like a tablet. And we want to make this the default for our shape. Well, if you have the shape currently selected, all you need to do is hit Update My Shape, and it will immediately update over here in the Shapes pane. And now if you want to add more items to the shape, because we redesigned things, like for instance, we have a breadcrumb trail, which is very common among websites, or we could put like a link bar. Then we have this here. And just to note, you can also customize the text here. So it doesn't need to just be the dummy text. It could be like homepage, spacebar, and we could put here the blog or the contact, etc. And you can even put hyperlinks here. So this can be basically real information or real links if that's what you want to do and you want to put the time in to configure it. But if we want to make this our My Storyboard shape, we can't just select all three of these and hit Update My Shape, because you're updating just the original item when you hit Update My Shape. So as long as we have three selected, how we would do that is to just create a new shape. So add this to My Shapes. And if we don't need the original anymore, we can simply delete that with the delete key, hit yes, and rename this. I'm hitting F2 on my keyboard to open the text dialog. So My Storyboard Shape. And now it's updated. So really, that's all there is to the shapes component of storyboarding. It's all about creating designs, creating shapes that you can reuse however you want to, and it's actually pretty useful. There's a lot of really cool items here you can play around with to make a really good looking slide or presentation. Now, as for storyboard links over here, it's something we're not going to cover too much, but what this allows you to do is basically, assuming you're connected to Microsoft and you've signed in up here in the top right, you can connect to a Team Foundation server project. And usually what that's going to be is your developers on a team have an app that they're working on. And in order to get connected, the administrator on the project would have to add you as a team member. And then you'll be able to add in information from that project, such as a list of bugs or queries that are associated with the project, and I mean database queries by that, and bring them into our storyboards, our designs, or just our slides in general. That's something we're not really going to cover too much here, simply because it's a bit more of a complicated topic and connects back into other aspects of Microsoft. However, if there's enough support for it, I can go ahead and create an extra presentation for this course. Just let me know if that's something you're interested in. The storyboarding help link at the very end here brings up the Microsoft website, where it details out some information about what we were talking about in this video, how to storyboard, and that sort of information, as well as storyboard links and how that works. So you can check that out for more information, though you can see it's a little bit, well, let's say a little bit more than a little bit outdated. Microsoft PowerPoint 27, or 2007 rather. The information, though, still generally applies, so you might find something useful there. So that's all for this video on the storyboarding tab of PowerPoint 2016. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. In this PowerPoint 2016 presentation, we're going to go back to the Insert tab and briefly touch on the store and add-ins. Now, add-ins are not like a plugin specifically. They're a lot more like a Windows 10 app that you simply include within PowerPoint or any other of the Office 2016 applications. So when we go to the store, we can see all of the different add-ins that people have made, and we can select one to include in our PowerPoint 2016 presentation. Some will appear on the screen as an object, almost like including a website or an app straight onto your PowerPoint slide, and some of the other ones will have a new pane pop out here with some extra functionality that you can use in each of your presentations. So in this example, we're going to go ahead and find the stock tile add-in so that we can display stock market information right inside of our slide. Now, this is just for an example. You may or may not actually want to use this add-in or any of the other add-ins. It's completely optional, and what add-ins are available depends entirely on what people decide to create as time goes forward. So in this case, we have this miniature little app or add-in, and we're going to look up a stock so that we can display the information here. So let's go ahead and use Google. I believe GOOG stands for Google within the stock market anyway. Only makes sense. So here we can see that it is at a $335.98 share price, and that it is up 84 cents. Now we can take this and we can move the object containing this add-in to basically any other slide we have. So if we go ahead and create a new slide, we can add this in as a little add-in that we can have over here on the right. Now there are many different types of add-ins, and it would take forever to cover all of them. Just know, if you want to get some extra functionality, you can go ahead and check the add-in store back on the Insert tab. Not every single one is free. These are independent developers in most cases that are actually going ahead and creating these add-ins. So some of the people may actually be doing this for a living. It kind of depends. I imagine a lot of them are just kind of independent for fun mini projects to hone their skills, but you get the idea. Add-ins, you can use it to basically add in extra functionality to PowerPoint 2016 or other Office 2016 applications. So that's all for this brief video on add-ins and the Microsoft Store for PowerPoint 2016. Until the next video, I will see you then.